Hello, crafty friends. My name is Jessica, and welcome back to my channel. Today we have a card using a older stamp set that I have yet to use, and I'm in this kick of revisiting some of these stamp sets that I haven't maybe gotten a chance to do yet. So we're going to go ahead and do an ink smushing, and I'm using a laminated piece of paper, a white piece, and I'm going in with tumbled glass, broken china, and faded jeans, and just kind of going all over to create this panel. Now, I am not one to be a ink smushing master, and so what I did is I did spray my panel of paper first before going to the ink just to see what it would do, and it made it a little bit softer than what I was wanting. But I do know with ink smushing, layering tends to be the best, or at least the way that I like to ink smush the most. And so I am going to go in a couple times. Here we are going in the second time after drying the panel off camera. I added some more tumbled glass and broken china. And then I went ahead and dried that panel again and then wanted a little bit more of that faded jeans. So we're going to go back in one more time before I am completely happy. With ink smushing, I do like to get those little flecks, as you can see there. I just love the texture that it gives when you achieve those little flecks. It's almost like splattering without splattering, but different because it's not opaque splatter that you're adding. It's still got that translucent look to it. So I went ahead and set that panel over to the side. And now we're going to go ahead and get started on our coloring. I'm going to be doing some alcohol ink coloring as well as colored pencil. And so I'm using 80-pound Neenah Solar White. This is the cardstock I prefer to use with my alcohol markers. And then I'm also using Simon's Stamp Intense Black ink. Now you're probably wondering why I inked that up and then wiped it off. I was going to prime the stamp set since I haven't used it before, and so I felt like that was the best way to do it since I had already put ink onto it, was to go ahead and rub it off and then put it back on, and that would hopefully prime it a little bit more than just going in without being primed. Now I am adding these other leaf clusters, and I end up not using it. So you'll see there in an end, but I loved this little orange, so I'm adding that to one of the leaves that is not got an orange on it. But I loved the idea of having another little orange piece on this branch. When you'll see at the end, the way that I layered this, it gives you the threes, which is really pleasing to the eye and the art realm. I always do three sets of jewels on one side. It's that rule of three. So we're going to go ahead, and I used Intense Black ink. This is with Simon Says Stamp. This is the alcohol ink that I like, that I have found it doesn't smudge. I did use another brand, and I just could, for the life of me, no matter how much I heat set it, it always smudged. And I used the same paper. So I went ahead and heat set that off camera just to be sure that it was completely dry. And then we're going to go in with our alcohol markers. I am using the Ohuhu 168 marker bundle. I've had these markers for a couple of years now. I bought them because they are a really great price point. Before they got, I don't want to say controversial, but they're a little bit controversial, I guess. I have used them because I wasn't ready to commit to a marker that I had no experience with and wanted to fork out the money if it was something that I was not going to be able to use or find that I was any good at it. So I did buy these, like I said, a few years ago, and I have found that the color variation with these markers, or the color scope, is not that great, but I do make it work. I have been able to blend some colors that are not close on the hue saturation level, like those oranges. They are very different, but they did give me a pretty good seamless blend. And these greens are definitely not close to each other, but I end up making it work. And I get most of my blending with just two colors. Now, I do not call myself a colorist. I am definitely a novice, or maybe a step above novice. I enjoy coloring. It's just not my go-to, but I do like doing it every now and then, and pushing myself to try something that I know I'm not the best at is something I'm looking to do for 2024. So, like I said, I'm using two colors, going in with the lightest color, and then I add the darker color for those darker shadows, and then I pull the color up by going over the darker color with the original light color. So you can get three different shades if you're just using two colors. So that's why I've enjoyed these markers. I am considering some other markers in the future, but for now, the amount of coloring that I do, these have been sufficient. I would recommend that you do all the research that you need to do when purchasing markers to make the best choice for you. So I'm going in trying to find the right color of pink. There isn't a really good pale pink that isn't fluorescent in this line. And so I'm trying to find one that's a little bit brighter than the one I'm using, but I end up pulling one that's a little bright. But it does end up toning down, and I add some yellow to it to kind of offset that brightness of it. It doesn't look like it here, but in person, I was not happy with how bright it was. So I wanted to definitely tone that down. I also brought in the colorless blender. I do use that occasionally when I want to blow the color out, I guess, is what I'm thinking. I don't know if that's the right term, but to kind of soften that pink, I used the colorless blender. After adding the yellow, I'm really happy with the way that those orange blossoms turned out. So now I'm going to go ahead and move into the branch, which will wrap up this coloring. And like I said, I've only used two colors for each of these sections. So the leaves, the oranges, and now the branch. I'm just going in, and you can see that those colors are pretty drastically different. But just going in with that dark and then pulling it out using the original color that we laid down first gives a nice shadow and an added color bonus. So now what I like to do when I'm adding die cuts such as these to a like any kind of panel, whether it's a solid color or this ink smushed one, is I like to pull a color that matches the background. Now I can't match it completely because we did ink smush, and it would be really challenging to do that and also keep the pristine image without masking. But so what I did is I found this blue that tends to be close to the mid range of those blues on that panel. And I'm going around the image and creating a border about an eighth of an inch, I would say, all the way around, because I'm then going to fussy cut this out. But what this does is it softens these images, makes them feel a little bit more a part of the background, and it doesn't have such that drastic white border when you cut them out. And we're going to see that in a little bit when I start to fussy cut them. That's what I did for the alcohol ink. And then I remembered that a lot of people who are much better at coloring than me add colored pencils after they've done their alcohol color blends. So I decided to just try it. Why not? So I went and grabbed these luminescent colored pencils, another colored unit that I did commit to these. They are on the rather pricey side, but I've had these for a few years, and I love them. I don't have much to compare. They're definitely better than Crayola, but I'm not sure how they compare to the Faber-Castell and the Prismacolors. So these are the ones that I found after watching videos that I wanted to pursue. They are definitely a softer tip, but I've loved all of the coloring that I've used them with and cannot speak unhighly of them because they are very, very fun to play with. Now, I'm just going in, I'm not coloring over the whole image. I'm just adding a little bit of colored pencil to kind of bring that depth of color up another step. I see a lot of people do this when they're using alcohol markers, and it just creates another extra layer of texture and depth to your images. So now we're going to go ahead and fussy cut them out. And as you can see, I am leaving a little bit of a border, but since we used that color marker, we don't have to worry about the white showing. I gave enough of a bumper around the images that this little bit of border that we're using to cut these images out will be sufficient. I enjoy fussy cutting. I do believe there are dies for this set that I do not own, but I do believe they are available. I will be sure to link them below if they are. But the trick with fussy cutting is to just move the paper. Don't move your scissors. That's where you're going to find that you have the least amount of control and that just using the paper is the trick. I also very much enjoy these scissors from Simon Says Stamp. They have been great for fussy cutting. And an added bonus, adhesive does not stick to these. These are the fine detail ones, and there's also the larger ones, the everyday scissors. And I have yet to find an adhesive that would stick to the scissors, so they are absolutely great. So now that we got those cut out, I'm loving the orange that's popping off of that background. And now we're going to do the favorite part. This is the fussing. I'm fiddling and fussing, trying to figure out how I want to lay these out, knowing that I'm going to put a sentiment somewhere on this card. So do I want it to be top heavy? I'm kind of leaning that way, and then I end up changing it. But now looking back, I do like the way that's laid out. I would definitely make another card having both of those up at the top like that. But I do also like the way that we ended up moving forward with it. So I did want to create a border around. So I went ahead and trimmed this panel down to 5¼ by 4. And then we're going to go ahead and adhere it to this card base after we complete it. I started getting ready to create that as a card base and realized it was not the right weight. It was my Neenah 80-pound that I cut for my alcohol markers. So then I went ahead and found my 110 card base and switched. So I decided not to pop this up with foam tape because I'm going to be putting foam tape behind our images and our sentiment. So I went ahead and used dot runner, and then we're going to fussy cut, or not fussy cut, fiddle one more time. And this is kind of how I am determining how I'm going to lay this out. So now we're deciding what sentiment we're going to use. And I did end up going with the one that says, "The world is better with a mom like you in it." We do have Mother's Day coming up, and so I figured why not go ahead and check off one of the moms in my list by creating a card. We're also going to be using some of the butterflies. These are also from the stamp set, and I decided I wanted to do the butterflies on vellum and the sentiment on cardstock because we're going to go ahead and use that tumbled glass ink to blend over the sentiment to kind of give it a matching feel to the card. I went ahead and used a scrap piece of paper, and we're going to go ahead and heat set it and then move on to the next step. I love the shape of those butterflies, their wings, everything about them. They are very cute. They do look a little bit more of a moth style, but I am a fan. They're very adorable, and I can see myself using them in the future. Like I said earlier, we're going in with tumbled glass over that sentiment to kind of bring it to the same kind of feel to the cards. I'm going in with a light hand because I didn't want it too dark. I definitely just wanted a little touch of ink. Now, a thing about my blending brushes, I do use the same blending brushes for Distress ink as I do for my Positively Saturated inks with Simon Says Stamp. They are both dye based and they are both water reactive, and I have not had any problems or seen any kind of issues with using the same brushes. I do use different brushes for my oxides since that is a totally different ink formula. It tends to lean on to the pigment side. So now I'm just cutting out the sentiment. Again, I'm pretty sure there are dies for this set and it would probably cut those out if I had to guess. I will be sure to link those below. We're going to go ahead and fussy cut these butterflies out, and then we'll be all set to go ahead and move forward on creating this card and getting it wrapped up. When cutting out these butterflies, I did contemplate putting color behind it. So with vellum, you can turn it over and use alcohol ink to color the back of it and get a stained glass effect when you look at it the right side. And I contemplated doing it, but I felt, these oranges, I really wanted these little stems to stick out, so I decided not to. Now we're going to go ahead and add some foam tape. This is Simon Says Stamp foam tape. This is the loftier foam tape. They have a thinner one and this more loftier one, which I love to mention, and I love more loft than not. So I went ahead and did that, and we're going to add it to all of the images except for the butterflies. We are going to go ahead and glue those down with liquid glue. The two different sizes of these squares are sufficient for me. I feel like they are a big enough difference that I don't find that I need any additional sizes. But I will say this loft of these foam squares does pair nicely with my all too new foam tape that I also really, really enjoy. And another thing, those scissors I talked about earlier, they do not stick to these when you if you have to cut them down. We're going to go ahead and trim off the overhang, and then we're going to add the butterflies. I went ahead and bunched the wings up a little bit to give them a little bit more playfulness and kind of pop them up so they weren't flat on the card. And then the trick with vellum is less glue is best. So I'm going in with just very tiny little dots. The thicker areas of the butterfly, you can add some more, but you will end up seeing this glue from the other side if it is too thick. I got it a little thick there, so I wiped some off. But I went ahead and we're going to add those on, and then I felt like it needed just a little bit more. So I pulled out these rainbow splash gems, and I loved the ones that are cloudy. I felt like that kind of matched with the vellum. And what's nice about these is they already have the sticky stuff on the back. And that's the card for today. Be sure to expand the description box below to find a list of all the products we used today. And I just want to let you know, thanks for joining me and take care.